You walk into a room not with loud words or dramatic gestures, but with stillness, and yet everyone notices. They adjust their tone, straighten their posture, and think twice before speaking freely, not because you're dangerous, but because something about you demands respect. That's not charisma. That's psychological gravity. That's the Machiavellian mindset in motion, the quiet command of presence that makes others fear disrespecting you, even if they don't fully understand why.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
We live in a world where being liked is often mistaken for being respected, but the two are not the same, and chasing one can cost you the other. When you try to be liked, you soften your edges, you tolerate too much, and you give away your dignity in pieces. Respect, on the other hand, requires boundaries. It demands that you teach people who you are not just by your kindness, but by what you do when they cross the line. Niccolo Machiavelli once said, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." The modern mind misinterprets this, thinking it means cruelty, but Machiavelli wasn't advocating for tyranny. He was revealing a truth about how humans respond to power. People respect those they fear to lose. They fear the loss of access, the loss of privilege, the loss of your presence. If you want to be respected, you must be willing to walk away. Disrespect doesn't always come with a slap in the face. It often arrives dressed as a joke at your expense, a broken promise, a subtle dismissal, or a moment where your time is treated like it's disposable. The way you respond in those micro moments sets the tone for your entire relationship. If you stay silent, if you brush it off, if you keep showing up like nothing happened, you tell them everything they need to know. You've shown them that your self-respect has a price, and it's cheap. Machiavelli believed that maintaining power was a matter of perception. He said, "A prince must learn how not to be good and to use this knowledge, or not use it, according to necessity." In your life, that means knowing when to withhold kindness, when to stop explaining, and when to retreat without warning. You don't need to fight every battle, but you do need to make your silence heavier than your words. People must feel the shift when they cross you, not through shouting, but through subtraction. The first step is mastering your own energy. You cannot expect respect from others if you are constantly abandoning yourself. If your identity is rooted in external validation, you'll always be compromised. People will sense the desperation behind your kindness, and they will exploit it, whether consciously or not. When you radiate self-trust, when your presence says, "I don't need to be here, I choose to be," people recalibrate around you. The ones who fear disrespecting you aren't afraid of punishment. They're afraid of consequence. That distinction is everything. You're not threatening anyone, you're simply making it clear that access to you is a privilege, and privileges can be revoked. When someone knows that crossing you results in emotional distance, in silence, in absence, they start to think twice before taking you for granted. Let's go deeper into psychology. Human beings are wired to respond more intensely to loss than to gain. This is called loss aversion. People will work harder to avoid losing something than they will to earn something new. When you become the kind of person whose presence is valuable but not guaranteed, you flip the script. You become someone whose respect must be protected, not assumed. Ask yourself, how many times have you let someone disrespect you out of fear of conflict? How often have you allowed small offenses to slide, thinking, it's not worth making a scene. But over time, those small moments compound. They become patterns. They become the foundation of how others treat you. And once someone sees that you'll tolerate disrespect, they start to see you as someone who doesn't require effort. Machiavelli said, "Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see and few can feel." What people see in you, how you carry yourself, how you respond to disrespect, how you enforce your boundaries, matters more than your intentions. You may have a good heart, but if your actions show weakness, that's what people register. Respect is not built on how nice you are. It's built on how firmly you stand when it matters. You don't have to be loud to be respected. You don't have to be aggressive, but you do have to be clear. The most powerful people are often the quietest, because their energy speaks louder than their words. When you withdraw your presence without explanation, when you go silent instead of arguing, when you stop giving where you are not valued, you create an echo that people feel long after you're gone. This is the Machiavellian principle of consequence. You don't make threats. You don't beg. You don't explain yourself repeatedly. You show the cost of crossing you. If they lie, you stop trusting. If they mock, you stop sharing. If they ghost, you stop reaching out. And when they notice your absence, they'll realize that something valuable has disappeared. But here's the challenge. You must be okay with being misunderstood. Most people won't understand your silence. They'll call you cold. They'll say you're overreacting. But that's only because they've never been forced to reflect on their own behavior. Let them sit in that discomfort. Let them wonder, because in that wondering they'll feel something they didn't expect. Machiavelli would advise you not to reveal your entire strategy. He believed in mystery. He wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." And that's your power. You don't need to convince anyone of your strength. You just need to carry yourself like someone who doesn't tolerate disrespect. And when you do, the world rearranges itself around you. Let's talk about emotional discipline. When someone disrespects you, your first instinct might be to react, to argue, to prove, to defend. But power lies in restraint. The one who can remain calm while others lose control holds the throne. Your silence becomes a mirror. It forces them to look at themselves. It makes them question, reevaluate, and, if they're wise, apologize. But not everyone will apologize. Some will walk away. Some will never understand. And that's okay, because making people fear disrespecting you is not about controlling others. It's about controlling your own standards. It's about refusing to stay in spaces that diminish you. It's about choosing your dignity over temporary connection. So here's the question you must face. What would your life look like if you enforced your boundaries with quiet certainty? What would change if every time someone disrespected you, you responded not with emotion, but with absence? Could you hold that silence? Could you protect your peace, even if it meant losing people who never truly valued you? That's the core of the Machiavellian mindset. Not manipulation, but clarity. Clarity about who you are, what you deserve, and what you will no longer allow. It's about deciding that your energy is not available to just anyone, that your time, your attention, your love are earned. And once you make that shift, everything changes. Now, you're not the one begging to be seen. You're the one who sees clearly. You're not the one who fears being abandoned. You're the one who walks away first. You become the standard, the mystery. the presence they can't quite forget, not because you demanded respect, but because you embodied it. The most dangerous person in any room is the one who cannot be provoked, the one who doesn't react, doesn't explain, and doesn't need validation. That person is operating from a place of power that most people never reach, not because they're emotionless, but because they've mastered the art of control. And in that control, there is fear. A quiet, undeniable fear that if you cross them, they won't lash out, they'll disappear. Machiavelli understood that fear isn't about intimidation, it's about consequence. He believed that people don't change when you ask them to, they change when they're forced to. And nothing forces someone to reevaluate their behavior like losing access to you. He wrote, "The injury that is to be done to a man ought to be of such a kind that one does not stand in fear of revenge." That means if someone wrongs you, the response should be so definitive that they never try it again. And that doesn't require violence, it requires withdrawal. We often think we need to teach people how to treat us by explaining ourselves. But explanation without consequence is noise. If you tell someone they hurt you and they feel no cost, they will continue to do it. Why wouldn't they? Words alone don't teach. Loss teaches, absence teaches, silence teaches. When you remove your warmth, your energy, your presence, people start to feel the weight of their actions. Let me ask you something. How many people in your life are only still there because you've never shown them what it looks like when you're really done? Not angry done, not dramatic done, but solid, unshakable done. The kind of done where your energy shifts and never returns. That's the kind of presence that commands respect, not because you threatened them, but because you became untouchable. There's a reason people chase what pulls away. It's not just psychology, it's primal. In the wild, the animal that doesn't react to noise is the most feared, because it's unpredictable, it doesn't waste energy, and it doesn't fear confrontation. That's what you must become. The person who can walk away from anything that disrespects their peace. Not to prove a point, but because your soul demands it. Machiavelli wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. In life, you must be both. You must be aware of the subtle signs of disrespect, passive aggression, condescension, manipulation. And you must also be bold enough to strike back with silence, with removal, with your absence. Silence is the loudest language of power. When someone disrespects you and you say nothing but change everything, they feel it. It creates a discomfort they can't place. They start to question their own behavior. They check their phone. They replay conversations. They wonder if they miscalculated. And in that wondering, you reclaim your power. Not by chasing, but by becoming a ghost they can't forget. The biggest mistake we make is over-explaining our worth. We think if we just say it clearly enough, people will finally understand, but the truth is, people understand your value best when they feel your absence, when you stop being available, when you stop showing up, when you stop making excuses for them. That's when they realize they lost something irreplaceable. There's a psychological principle called intermittent reinforcement. It's the most powerful form of conditioning. When you give people inconsistent access to your energy, when your presence is earned, not guaranteed, they value it more. Not because you're playing games, but because you're not handing out your energy like candy. You're protecting your kingdom. and only the worthy are allowed in. Ask yourself, what if you stopped trying to fix every relationship? What if you stopped explaining your boundaries and just lived them? Would people still stay? Or would they reveal themselves as only interested in the version of you they could control? That's the hard truth. Some people only like you when you're easy to manipulate. The moment you become self-respecting, they vanish. Let them. Machiavelli warned against generosity that leads to contempt. He said, "The liberality which does not bring you the reputation of being liberal injures you." In other words, if your giving is not respected, it will be exploited. That applies to your money, your time, your loyalty, and your love. If others don't fear losing those things, they will never value receiving them. So how do you become someone they fear disrespecting? You stop rewarding disrespect with access. You stop proving yourself to people who don't deserve your explanation. You stop staying in rooms where your presence is tolerated but not celebrated. And you start treating your energy like a rare resource, because it is. And once you do, people will feel the shift. People always notice when you change, especially when you stop making their comfort more important than your self-respect. At first, they may resist, they may guilt you, they may try to pull you back into the old dynamic, but that's where your strength is tested. You must hold the line. You must let the silence do the work. You must trust that the right people will adjust and the wrong ones will exit. Machiavelli believed in calculated cruelty, not to harm others, but to preserve power. He wrote, "A prince must be slow to believe and to act, nor should he himself show fear, but proceed in a temperate manner with prudence and humanity." That's your blueprint. Be slow to trust, be slow to give. But when someone violates that trust, act with clarity, act with finality, act with silence. Your silence is a mirror. It reflects back to people their own behavior. It makes them see what they refuse to acknowledge. And it forces them to realize something most people fear, that your respect is not limitless, that your love has limits, that your loyalty ends where self-betrayal begins. That's how you become unforgettable. Let's get brutally honest. You've been disrespected before, and you stayed. You've been lied to and forgave too quickly. You've been taken for granted and kept giving. Why? Because you feared being alone more than you feared being disrespected. But what if that changed? What if you decided today that being alone with self-respect is better than being surrounded by people who fearlessly cross your boundaries? Imagine being the kind of person who doesn't flinch when someone walks away. Imagine being the one who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain. Because deep down, you know your value. You know that whoever fails to see it is simply not qualified to stand beside you. That's not arrogance, that's awareness, and awareness is power. Machiavelli knew that fear, when used wisely, creates order, it creates clarity, it draws lines in the sand that irrational love cannot. So ask yourself now, who in your life would treat you differently if they knew that one act of disrespect would cost them everything? Who would still be here if you stopped explaining and started enforcing? Your time is coming. The version of you that tolerated nonsense is dying, and in its place a new self is rising. One that walks away, not out of anger, but out of principle. One that doesn't yell but disappears. One that doesn't convince but commands. And once you become that version, they will never forget you. There's something rare and terrifying about a person who knows their worth and doesn't flinch when others fail to recognize it. That kind of stillness, that grounded confidence, it makes people nervous, it makes them careful. Because deep in their subconscious they realize this isn't someone they can manipulate. This isn't someone they can casually disrespect and expect to keep around. And that's precisely the energy you must cultivate, an energy that communicates. If you cross the line, you lose access. No warnings, no second chances. Machiavelli once said, "Men must either be pampered or annihilated." And while that sounds extreme, the idea holds psychological truth. People often respond only to extremes. If you're too soft, they take advantage. If you're too harsh without strategy, they rebel. But when you strike the perfect balance, when your kindness is deliberate and your distance is surgical, you become someone they fear losing, not because you're cruel, but because your presence is powerful and your absence is devastating. Let's look at the deeper psychology. Human beings are wired to test boundaries. Even people who love you will test how far they can go, sometimes unconsciously. It's not always malicious, it's instinct. It's how people figure out where they stand. But once they know you'll tolerate disrespect without consequence, they stop fearing your loss. And once they stop fearing your loss, they stop respecting you. That's the brutal truth. And you've probably already lived it. Have you ever noticed how people treat the friend who's always available, always agreeable, always forgiving, no matter what? That person becomes invisible. Their kindness becomes expected. Their forgiveness becomes a license to repeat bad behavior. But the friend who disappears the moment they feel disrespected, who doesn't yell, doesn't explain, just vanishes, that friend is respected. They might be called cold or difficult, but they are never taken for granted. That's the Machiavellian standard. Become someone whose absence is felt as much as their presence is appreciated. You are not here to be background noise in someone else's life. You are not here to be the emotional safety net for those who refuse to grow. You are here to be the storm and the silence, the warmth and the warning. A person of depth, precision, and consequence. This is about more than just relationships. It's about how you move through the world, in business, in friendships, in your family. Do people fear disrespecting you, or do they assume you'll always tolerate being overlooked? Do they feel the cost of your time and energy, or do they treat it like it's free? Machiavelli believed that leadership, true leadership, requires a willingness to be misunderstood, to be feared, even to be disliked, if it means maintaining order and power. The same is true for self-leadership. You cannot lead yourself with clarity if you're constantly bending to be liked. So what does this look like in real life? It means not chasing after people who ghost you. It means not responding to disrespect with desperate explanations. It means mastering the art of the pause. When someone crosses a line, you don't react. You don't fight. You let time reveal your value. You let absence do the talking. And if they come back changed. If they don't, they were never meant to walk beside you in power. You must become emotionally untouchable, not in a numb or closed-off way, but in a way that no longer allows disrespect to penetrate your sense of self. This is your inner fortress. Machiavelli once said, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." Don't wait until you're drained, disrespected, and discarded to remember your worth. Move now. Cut early. Walk away the first time, because the second time it's no longer their fault, it's yours. Let's go deeper. Many of us were conditioned to think that being feared is a bad thing, that fear and love can't coexist, but that's a lie. In fact, the people we love the most are often the ones we fear disappointing. Your parents, your mentors, your closest friends. That fear isn't rooted in terror, it's rooted in respect, in knowing that if you cross a line, you'll lose something sacred. That's what you must embody, a sacred presence. Not fragile, not desperate, sacred. How do you build that presence? Through discipline, through consistency, through the refusal to betray yourself for temporary comfort. Every time you let something slide that violates your standards, you lose self-respect. And when you lose self-respect, others follow. You become a mirror. If you don't fear letting yourself down, they won't either. But when you hold yourself to a higher code, people either rise to meet you or they disappear, and both outcomes are wins. Because you're not here for the masses. You're here for the few who understand what it means to be in your space. You're not interested in being popular, you're interested in being powerful. And power doesn't beg, it doesn't explain, it doesn't chase. Power watches, it decides, it enforces. Machiavelli said, "He who is the cause of another becoming powerful is ruined." Think about how many times you've elevated someone who later disrespected you. Maybe you gave them access to your ideas, your love, your support, and they used it without gratitude. That's not just betrayal. That's poor strategy. You gave power to someone who had no fear of losing you. And now you know better. From this point forward, you must make a silent vow. Never again will I reward disrespect with attention. Never again will I explain my worth to someone who couldn't see it the first time. Never again will I soften my standards to make others comfortable. You will be sharp, you will be silent when necessary, and you will be unforgettable. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied something too rare to ignore. You don't need to scream for respect, you just need to embody it. It's in how you walk, how you speak, how you respond, or don't respond. It's in the way you exit quietly, without drama, but with finality. And when you do that consistently, people begin to fear not your anger, but your absence. That's where your power lives. Let's bring it full circle. This isn't about becoming cold or bitter. It's about becoming clear. It's about understanding that the greatest form of love you can offer to yourself and others is rooted in respect. And respect only exists when there are boundaries, when there are consequences, when there's a line that, once crossed, changes everything.